Assalamu alaikum, everybody, and welcome to Noor Riyadh. My name is Gareth Doherty, and I'm an independent curator, and I'll be moderating tonight's Noor Talk as part of the Noor Riyadh public activations and learning programs. Just to give a brief overview, Noor Riyadh is one of the major celebrations under the 2019 established Riyadh Art Program, which was established under the vision of His Royal Highness Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman. It's a city-wide festival of light art that unites Saudi and international artists and thinkers with the mission to transform the city into an open-air gallery, aiming to nurture curiosity, creativity, and public interaction. The theme of this first edition is Under One Sky, and it alludes to togetherness and the universal impulse to gather around light and be inspired together. Our panel today revolves around how light interacts with urban spaces, be it exterior or interior, and specifically how paying attention to our experiences of light can help us further understand our own culture and society. Tonight's expertise will give us a glimpse on how light, or even its absence, impacts our daily experiences in all of these spaces and our environment, and how light's connection, sometimes even to the cosmos, can be reflected in our environment. So without further ado, I'm so happy to present Dr. Fahad AlSaeed and Ustad العزيز العظم and Gareth Doherty. Hello, everyone. I'm so happy to be talking to you.
Hello.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Hi. I'm going to give a brief overview of your backgrounds to our listeners and speakers before we kind of launch into your presentations. So I'll start with Gareth Doherty. Gareth is an assistant professor of landscape architecture at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design, where he is also the director of the Masters in Landscape Architecture program. He is also the lead faculty for the Critical Landscapes Design Lab. And through the lens of human experience, Doherty explores diverse forms of knowledge that constitute landscape architecture. He has authored and edited several books, including Paradoxes of Green, Landscapes of a City-State, which I recommend if anyone hasn't read it to read. Also, we have Al-Aziz Al-Azm, and he's the founder and principal lighting designer of DTS, or Design Tech Services, and it's a company that is based in Riyadh. Al-Aziz grew up in Jeddah and moved to Beirut to study interior architecture at the Lebanese University. And as a student, he developed a fascination for the relationship between light and architecture and took up a minor in Islamic architecture, which later develops, as we will know from the story. Aside from working at his family's lighting retail business in Jeddah when he came back, he also learned how to develop lighting designs with themes and looked into apprenticeship in Germany under the mentorship of Volker van Kardorf. I hope I said that correctly. And through Volker's advice or mentorship, he eventually did a master's in the subject matter with a thesis called Sacred Noor. And we will refer to that, inshallah. I'm so excited for people to hear about that. Finally, Dr. Fahad AlSaeed, he's a consultant and Noor Program Advisory Board member who holds an MA in Architecture and City Planning and a PhD in Architecture and Urban Design from the University of Glasgow and a certificate in Urban Design from the University of Pennsylvania. Dr. Fahad was the Dean of College of Environmental Design in King Fahad University of Petroleum and Minerals and taught many subjects in the Department of Architecture and Design. There's a lot more that Dr. Fahad has done, but I'm not going to mention everything. I think everyone that's listening, if you are not aware or know about the work of our speakers, I really, really recommend that you look into it because everyone here is a fantastic thinker. So I'm going to start with Dr. Fahad. Hi, Dr. Fahad.
Hello, Tara. Hello to everyone.
Hi. Dr. Fahad, you participated and represented the kingdom as a speaker in many local and regional and international conferences also. Could you kind of give us your perspective on how architecture and design can build the future, especially through your experience with Noor Riyadh? تفضل, Dr. Fahad.
Very kind of you. First of all, I'm honored, and it's my greatest pleasure to be among this notable panelists and to be part of this winning team, Noor team. I would like to start my talk with a verse I heard more than 4 years ago. The verse says, "Only dreamers are welcome." Quote unquote, this is what Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, said 4 to 5 years ago. And I think everything we are seeing in Riyadh today is a reflection of this quotation, only dreamers are welcome. And my thanks extended to the Ministry of Culture, Prince Badr bin Abdullah Al-Farhan, and to all the associates who made this dream comes to true. And nevertheless, the young women and men who worked through the last few months to bring literally light to Riyadh. So thank you, everyone. Now, talking about design in general, I will just throw this note. If you type in the computer, what is architecture? For your surprise and mine, of course, you will find 2,900 million definition for that. Yes, 209,000 million definition for that. And this is great. This is exactly the dreamers. The dreamers always coming with fantastic ideas in design, in art, in creativity, in general. So all the dreamers are welcome. Now, all the definition, 2,900 million definition, are centered around one point. If the raw material of a blacksmith is the steel, and if the raw material of a carpenter is wood, and if the raw material of a goldsmith is gold, what is the raw material for designers in general and architects in particular? It is space. This is number one. Number two, we travel through time to the future to see the space, not today, because if you are lucky, you will see the formal space within a few days or months or years or even decades. And I always give the example, late architect Zaha Hadid died before she saw the airport in China. So we are dreamers, we are time travelers to the future to see what's good for the society today. Now, part of the creativity, as I said, is this journey to the past and the future, but mainly to the future. And we take the three elements of environments, the natural environment, the man-made environment, and the human environment to create the space. Now, the formal, the cognitive space in our heads, in our dreams, comes to formality once we define it by a wall, a roof, a floor, a change of color, and change of texture, and most importantly, by light. So light is an essential element of formal space making. You cannot have a space without light, and you cannot have light without a space. Now, this is in general the relationship between light and design. And of course, I'm sure that the panel have great designers who will show part of their creativity into making the cognitive space into a formal space. But I will conclude by saying, please go, or you have seen what happened in Riyadh. This is the biggest open exhibit that can change our cognition for the space and how we make spaces. Now, we make spaces in landscape, and our source for that is the natural environment. We look to the sky. It's the chandelier of the stars. It's the moon. It's the sun. It's the light coming from there. We look around. It's the cascade of waters. It's the lights everywhere, natural or man-made. This is the way we make, and we saw it in Riyadh. But I will conclude by the same statement I started with. Only dreamers are welcome, and no better dreamers than designers in general. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fahad. That was very inspiring and really a beautiful way to open this conversation. I do have one question before we move on to our next speaker. You did publish a book called The Native Architecture of Saudi, and it focused on architecture and identity. So I wanted to ask you, in your opinion, what's the building that most reflects our identity in Riyadh?
Well, I will answer it in 2 points. Point number one, I always use analogy. If you drive your car, you'll find a big window in front of you. We call it the windshield. And you have a small mirror at the top of the car. It's the back mirror. And this is the journey to the future or to creativity. You have to look to the big window, which is the future. And all designers are looking to the future. Nevertheless, you have to look to the small mirror to see the past, because time, present, past, and future are one thread. And we have to learn from it. We have to learn from it. You cannot go to the future without seeing the past. Nevertheless, you cannot live in the past forever. This is number one. Now we will come to the other side of it, of your question. I always ask to tie the question about architecture to two major variants, place and time. So for example, what is the culture or cultural architecture in Saudi Arabia? I will add to it, let's say in Abha, let's say 1800 Now you can talk about it and evaluate it and give the ups and downs of it. And you will compare it, for example, let's go back to Abha, in the architecture of the year 2021. And you will find, surprisingly, that our ancestor had made an architecture much better than what we have made today. They traveled in the future much better than what we have with all the technology we have. So I urge strongly the architects to travel to the future, to learn from the past and travel to the future. And the buildings I like the most is the building that, I will use this term again, shake my antenna, that I stand in front of it and I say, wow. And then I, again, use the let's say, future vehicle and try to go back and see the designer at that time, what he was thinking about. And can I do it in a way or another into the future design? So every traditional building, south, north, east, west, middle, has its own flavor as long as you appreciate the journey from the past to the future.
That's very eloquent. Thank you, Dr. Fahad. I'm just going to pick my own building later.
Very kind.
That was really, really well said. يعطيك العافية. Thank you, Dr.
Allah
Fahad.
Allah يحفظك. It's the honor and the greatest pleasure is mine. And to the person who stated the quotation, only dreamers are welcome.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Fahad. We will return to the table discussion. We're going to speak now with الأخ عبد العزيز. أهلا وسهلا فيك عبد العزيز العظم.
يا أهلين حياك الله.
الله يحييك. الله يحييك. عبد العزيز, your unique knowledge of lighting design, which I think it shows in all of the different spaces that you've designed for so many varieties. Could you kind of like talk us through some of the projects that you've created and what this means to you, what light in these spaces mean to you?
Sure. First of all, I would like to again thank all Noor team for having me in such interesting portal. And it's really amazing how being keen on spreading the knowledge and this truly helps all of us to showcase whatever knowledge we have and spread it to other nations. Thank you again, and would like to start before talking about the works I have done. Of course, as a lighting designer, my tool is actually controlling light in different volumes and spaces, whether it's interior spaces or exterior spaces. As a lighting designer, it is very important to actually balance the amount of light and of course, the presence of darkness, especially in different projects. This actually allows highlighting the architectural forms in different ways and to show actually the architectural and interior design in its best way as the interior designer or the architect really wants to highlight. It is really one of the unique things a lighting designer has is that I can really apply my capabilities in balancing light in different projects and different volumes and spaces and different types. It can be really a small art gallery. It can be a huge public building. So as a lighting designer, I can really be working with different clients. And this really enables me to understand and to have a greater knowledge in the different aspects and in different designs. As you can see through the works and through the slides that are passing in front of the audience, there are different pictures of art galleries, of restaurants, of offices, of also theaters. I have also done some theater lighting. It all really showcases that light is a very important tool that really enhances and shows the element or shows the space itself in different forms and different shapes. And sometimes at the same time, you can really play around with the light, as you can see in Noor Riyadh as an art scenario. It's not only a constant fixed dimension, it can be a moving dimension through time. And it's really a fascinating thing, especially with the advancements of lighting technology. It really helps us to use and utilize light in an amazing way, way much before. And of course, my passion in the beginning was doing lighting design for sacred architecture. And here you can see also some mosques that I have done. And one of my really landmark projects, it was like 6 years ago or 7 years ago, it was the King Abdullah Financial District Grand Mosque that really set apart or gave me really a very strong identity in the region and in Riyadh itself, or even in the Middle East, because it was really a very special project that I think we can a little bit talk about it in depth once we reach the images or the slides that are talking about this project. This is actually, in brief, what we can say about light and how it can really affect different spaces and forms. And light doesn't have to be always in one color. It can be color changing, it can be constant, it can be controlled, it can be focused, and sometimes it can be used as a diffuse element. It really creates a different effect through different spaces and analogies, as well as interior and landscape forms, or whatever kind of architectural programs or interior spaces in different kinds and forms, etc.
AlSaeed, thank you for showing us all of these different spaces. They're really, really beautiful. And I mean, I'm sure there's a lot more stories also about how the process is with all of these different clients, so completely different. You did mention the Grand Mosque project, so I'm hoping the team will get to that picture. So, what I wanted to ask you about that is that we did mention that the thesis that you wrote about Sacred Noor. And I wanted to ask you if this was like the ideas in that thesis, is it in this project that you finally sort of like experienced them and manifested them, and can you talk about that as well?
Yes, of course. Actually, when I did my master's degree, I have decided to write my thesis on sacred architecture in the title of Sacred Light or Sacred Noor. And my main study was actually to study and understand the historic mosques that were in different locations in the region, and of course how light was used in the past before the presence of electricity. And I have really discovered that really Muslims have used light in an amazing way, and there were really special, let's say, lighting layouts, special lighting tools depending on prayer times and so on. So of course, after I have done my studies, and I did actually visit more than 27 historic sites in Syria, in Lebanon, in Egypt, as well as Turkey. And after doing these visits, I did like a small guideline on how mosques should be lit. And my first project after I returned to Saudi Arabia, my first big, you can say, reference project was the Kaft Grand Mosque, and I have applied most of the things I studied and did research on, because lighting a mosque, especially in the interior, of course, exterior is just to expose the beauty of the building, but interior, we should be very careful in many aspects. One example in this photo, you can see that the walls are very bright, whether it's the day or the night. It is important that the lighting is distributed in a formal way, so you don't have a lot of shadow. You don't have, a lot of shadows exactly. Also, we have to prevent having a lot of bright areas and non-bright areas. Of course, the lighting levels, they have to be studied in the way that people can pray as well as people can read, and with the respect of different ages. So all these things were studied very well, of course, with the proper coordination with the architects who were Amrani and Associates. And it was really a truly amazing experience, because when you work with such amazing architectural firm who understands the importance of light, and they actually gave the task of doing a lighting design to a specialist, which is not usual. 6-7 years ago, lighting design in Saudi Arabia was not that very common. It was only used in very few projects. And in this mosque was really to have all these kinds of techniques and knowledge. They were really applied, and it was during my time where I came back after my studies in Germany, and when someone who is very fresh grad and he wants to to apply all the knowledge he has in one project, at the end it made me one of the proud designers who was able to work on such fascinating projects, because it's not only a mosque, it's also a unique landmark. And outside, actually, what makes it unique is that the facade of the building itself is the roof. It's not the sides of the building. So because all the towers has to watch the design of the Grand Mosque from the rooftop. This was also a unique element that was not found in any architectural form. So this is in brief what I can say about the Grand Mosque and about my work with light, we can say like a paintbrush on buildings. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Abdulaziz. Mashallah, it's beautiful, and I'm sure that everyone around it is also proud of it, that you and the architects managed to transfer that sense of pride that you felt to other people who are using it. I wanted to ask you, actually, you already answered a little bit of the question, but a lot of people think that lighting kind of comes afterwards, after a place is built and khalas. Maybe in some cases, and I was going to ask you, like, if you actually worked with the architects, you answered my question. So
yeah.
What's the importance of that, though, like in a project like this? And is it what's the importance of that?
It's actually, if it's an important building or a landmark building, it is really very important and very crucial to work with the architect in very early stages, like in concept development stages with the architect, because when the lighting designer is entering the project in late stages, there will be some restrictions, there will be some difficulties of integrating the light systems in the architecture itself. So instead of highlighting the space as the architect requires, it might be actually, there will be some requirements that would be lost due to some designs that were already finished without leaving a gap for light itself.
Yeah, understood. Thank you for answering that. Basically, it's a creative process as well that is based on philosophies and also technical requirements. So that's really nice to hear, because I know that a lot of designers are also watching this. So I thought it would be important to mention. Thank you, Abdulaziz. We'll get back to you also.
Mostly welcome. Thank you very much. Thank you.
We've reached Gareth. Hello, Gareth. How are you?
Hello.
Hello. How are you? Welcome. We're so happy.
I'm good, thanks.
We're so happy to have you, honestly.
It's amazing. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it very much, and thanks for all your organization. It's great to be on this panel.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we've all, I've had the same experience as you also as a moderator. Well done to the organizers, I have to say. I'm going to ask you this kind of like big question. So to get your presentation going, which is basically also introducing some of our speakers to what you've done. So a lot of your practice or action manifests in teaching, as we heard in the bio, but in those many years, in some of the years that you spent doing fieldwork in Bahrain and the Arabian Peninsula, which also helped in your teaching, you reached a deeper understanding of light through its absence in landscapes in the region. So could you talk to us about, give us a short journey through some of these landscapes that you've experienced, and also maybe share some of the observations that led to this idea that you mentioned to me a couple of days ago called designing with darkness, which I think I find so elusive and exciting. So that's my question.
Well, in many ways, my presentation will answer your question, I hope, because it's based on some observations from living in Bahrain.
Yeah, okay.
But, essentially, I was in Bahrain to work on a book that you mentioned, Paradoxes of Green.
Yeah.
And when I left, I realized that actually most of my fieldwork was done during the nighttime. I'll go through my presentation, and then we can come back to why Bahrain. But as I said, a few years ago, I lived in the Gulf for a year, and I was doing fieldwork on how Bahrainis use and understand landscape. I chose Bahrain because the entire country is very small in one walkable area. Here we see an image of the Gulf. If I could, I would walk wherever I would need to go. Walking is a great way to experience landscape and to meet people. And one of the great things about walking is it helps you to construct the opportunities for encountering the unexpected. For me, one of the most unexpected aspects of my life in Bahrain was how much of social life is conducted during the hours of darkness. Because of the heat and intensity of the sun, it can be very difficult to walk outside during the day, as you know. So I often spent the hottest parts of the day indoors, and when the sun went down and the temperature along with it, I would go outside and walk following the adhan, or the call to prayer. Now, Fahad Khouri, a Lebanese anthropologist, tells us that the time of the day in Bahrain that is so special is between the day and the night. It's when the sun is going down and the sky is yellow. And Bahrain has a nocturnal landscape, and many of my Bahraini friends avoided the day and inhabited the nighttime too. For some who dwell in the night, dinner is breakfast and breakfast is dinner. I observed how the nights in Bahrain are bursting with life. After dark, the souk is filled with shoppers. Migrant workers sit alongside the sides of the road watching the world go by. It's when people go camping in the desert. The night is not just peculiar to Bahrain, as you know, but public spaces all over the Arabian Peninsula come alive at night. Souk Waqif in Doha has a bustling atmosphere during the night filled with smells of bukhor and spices. And Dubai's waterfronts are mostly occupied between dusk and dawn. Here we see the beach in Dubai. The night in Dubai is very bright. So too is the promenade at Dubai Marina, also is very bright. The Corniche in Jeddah is a popular nighttime walk. I've been there. Here we see men playing dominoes at night in the streets of Riyadh. With the nocturnal uses of public space, it's no wonder we want to turn night into day and create 24-hour landscapes. The night is getting brighter, and we can't see the stars. The following sequence of images shows us Riyadh at night, Saudi Arabia at night. It looks like it's on fire. Here we see the Gulf at night. And the entire Arabian, and this is a map of the Middle East and India. And the entire Arabian Peninsula at night almost looks as bright as the stars of the sky. Compare it to Egypt and Sudan to the left. The urban is an accumulation of artificial light, or so the urban scholar and geographer Henri Lefebvre seems to insinuate when he tells us that the urban, here I quote, the urban is most forcefully evoked by the constellation of lights at night, especially when flying over a city. The dazzling impression of brilliance, neon, street signs, street lights, incitements of various kinds, the simultaneous accumulation of wealth and signs. He's equating urbanity, cities, to the presence of light. At the same time, fighting the night comes at an environmental cost. The amount of energy that is expended in illuminating the night is often not considered. This image brings home just how much effort is expended in turning night into day. Can we ever see the stars again? The nighttime has very particular design challenges. Colors change, perceptions of space and distance change. Here we see 3 photographs taken in Dubai at the canal 3 different times, during the daytime, at sunset, and at night. But we see different things. The perceptions of space is changed and the colors change. So the nighttime has very particular design challenges. And some designers, as we have seen, are accepting the challenge of the nighttime. One such office, or another office, is the Associated Architects Partnership based in Kuwait. Inspired by the phenomenon of desert camps, AAP has designed a series of temporary mosques for desert areas at the edge of the city, taking cues from the canvas tents and car shades and the flexible programs of the camps, and providing basic infrastructures of adjustable lighting, water supply, and canopies. The canvas mosques are designed with the nighttime uses central to their concerns. Here we see different forms of lighting that correspond to different activities that are happening. So for some activities, a lower light is enough, and for some, you need more light. The designers describe their spatial logic as, here I quote, "Occupation strategies within these fields mimic those of transient desert camps, where the event supersedes the structure in which it is held, and where the night sky becomes a catalyst and the space under which the event takes place." Other strategies we can think of for the nighttime include what flowers flower only at night. The Cadeiro cactus, for example, from northeastern Brazil, blooms for just one night of the year. In a lecture, the Brazilian landscape architect Roberto Burle Marx describes this phenomenon he observed in the Caatinga biome in northeastern Brazil. He marvels at how the white flowers of the cactus open gently in the moonlight, offering their deep white throats to thousands of insects. And of course, you can imagine this white flower reflecting the moonlight just for one night of the year. Another way of imagining the nighttime could be through bioluminescence. Here we see a slide in the Maldives. Bioluminescence is a term given to the production and emission of light by a living organism. Perhaps if we conceive of bioluminescent materials and plants, we can imagine new possibilities for the illumination of cities of the future. Navigating the dark space of the night calls for an activation of our senses beyond the primacy of the visual, or at least for an understanding in which the nocturnal landscape is perceived through the articulation of vision with other sensuous modes of spatial registering. The cultural geographer Nina Morris writes, "While we do see in the dark, we do not necessarily see that which we wish to see, or in the manner we wish to see." The nighttime edits our perception and cognitive apprehension of space. How can public spaces be shaped without light? Why, I wonder, don't landscape architects, and other designers work more with darkness? We often try to turn night into day. Why don't we dwell in the nighttime more? There may come a time before long where we have no choice in the matter. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Doherty. That was very poetic and also critical, which I very much appreciate. I really appreciate how you also shared some examples of people in the region who are challenging themselves or addressing some of the challenges of designing with darkness. I have like a really weird sci-fi question, which you may or may not have an answer to. So we can only see a certain amount of things, whether in day or nighttime, right? Like we have a limited perception. Do you think that darkness can help us can be a good place to test out that field of perception with light?
Oh, of course. I mean, at nighttime, our perception changes because we're less dependent on what we see, and we become more aware of what we feel, what we smell, what we hear. And so we can definitely have a much more powerful experience in the nighttime. In fact, You know, some of my most memorable experience of landscape is from the nighttime. For that reason, because of the other senses and perception of space.
Well, thank you so much for giving us that perspective. I think we sometimes, you know, are so used to something that we miss out on what we could be having, you know, like trips to the desert, or even that is kind of reducing these days. I actually would love to open this question up to also to AlSaeed and Dr. Fahad about their nighttime experiences, if that's okay. Would you like to say something about that, Dr. Fahad?
Oh, yes, definitely. It's known through history that the dark and light, two, how can I say, associates together. If it's not for the darkness, you can enjoy light, and if it's not for the light, the darkness. And light and darkness are mentioned, I mean, culturally in our Quran more than 50 times. And there is a whole verse in Quran, Surah An-Nur, only for that. So yes, this is number one. Number two, I think the night light, if I call it this way, is more touching to human souls than the day night. Day is, everyone is busy and running, you know, for day-to-day work and businesses and schools and so on. But at night, you will be alone, looking up, and I repeat, looking up to the sky and seeing things and starting to see inside you. And if it's not for the dark, you will not appreciate light. If it's not for the light, you will not appreciate the light. Some other things, you know. So night is really the place for inspiration by light.
Thank you for that perspective. Go ahead, please, Dr. Doherty.
Oh, I was just going to say it's also when we dream, right? At night.
Yes, that's true.
Oh, that's a really nice connection you did there with Dr. Fahad's quote. That's very true. I will open also the floor. I would like to hear from AlSaeed about that, whether it's, you know, from the perspective of designing or just your personal experiences, you know, with darkness.
Well, actually, I can really say that night is, for me, as a person who has been dealing with the element of light for such a long time, artificial light, I would say, it gave me really a big contrast or a big difference when I studied abroad, how, let's say, Europeans, because I stayed like 3-4 years in Germany, nighttime in Europe has a certain limitation. So they stay until certain amount of time, and then everyone returns to his home. And this gave me a big difference in culture. Actually, in Saudi Arabia, it's very different. We have tendency of reacting and going out at night due to the nature of the weather and also the culture. I would really say that nighttime is a time of gathering, a time of really sensing the space outside your home, not only in the city. Even when there's a gathering with your friends, you'd rather go to a desert area, enjoying the fire or whatever. So it's really night, I think, in the Gulf region has a stronger importance in anywhere else, for to say so. Yeah, thank you.
That's really interesting. Thank you. Actually, that makes me want to also add a question to Dr. Doherty about like whether you looked at other nocturnal landscapes in the world and your observations also on those. Are they kind of the same, or you know? That's pretty much the question.
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. There are different parts of the world for which inhabit the nighttime differently. For example, right now I'm in Cambridge, Massachusetts in the United States. And here, if you go to a public park at nighttime, you're probably up to no good. And yet, when you go to a public park in Bahrain, which I know, you know, it's if you go in the daytime, you're probably up to no good, and it's probably at nighttime when the park is most alive. And I think that this cultural difference, you know, is obviously tied to to very deep cultural differences, but also to climate. I mean, it's also in China, I see a lot of nocturnal uses of public space, people performing Tai Chi and so on in the very, very early hours of the morning. So different societies have different ways of reacting to the nighttime. And I think the problem is that too much architects and other designers, like landscape architects, are designing, assuming everything is during the day. But the nighttime has very particular uses that we need to account for and are not often accounted for enough in the design of public space.
Well, I mean, what a great opportunity to actually think about this, because Noor Festival is entirely experienced in the evening. So I think this is like the perfect platform to talk about that. If anyone has anything else to add about this particular question, feel free before maybe moving on to another one.
Yeah, just a minor thought about this. Actually, even in lighting design, it's very known that there are standards of lighting levels for even for urban spaces. And if we really apply these standards adequately, exactly as they are in Saudi or in the Gulf region, we might sometimes face problems because the standards are set on situations that are in other countries. They cannot be applied exactly as they are, because here we have tendencies of loving brightness more than other places, due to the fact that we are exposed to sunlight, and at night we don't like to have these very dark dimmed spaces, even if it's a public park or a different space. That's just a point I would like to add. Yeah.
That's awesome. That actually makes me want to add something, if that's okay. I'm thinking about people in rural areas and how the lighting works over there. I think like we're also all speaking from city perspectives, and I'm wondering how it's experienced in, I don't know, like the South or the North. But it's just a thought that I put out there for myself and for the listeners as well. We do have a question from YouTube, if that's okay. I'll move on to that. There's a question for Dr. Fahad and AlSaeed about what Gareth said. What kind of relationship do you have with stars and light at night? How is it, and if possible, to live the night without artificial lighting? Dr. Fahad, would you like to go first?
We are nature and back to nature. And remember, the best poetry ever said are said at night. Nevertheless, remember that the best prayers in our culture in Islam, the best prayers are night prayers. Night means it's you and the environment. No one is around. So strong effect of the environment you at night. And there is a strong relation and the environment at night. Be it in the ritual part, in prayer, be it in the poetry and so on. And remember that only happiness, how can I say, invade at night, alone with the environment. It's experience. I'll talk about the desert experience. It's an experience that we pass through, and I advise everyone to go through. I haven't seen the desert night example except in Alaska, in the ice desert, I call it. It's the only experience. I lived it myself. The desert at night is a source of so. If you ask me are these so many things, I advise you to go to the desert at night alone, and you will discover it. Beautiful. It's an experience that cannot be explained with words. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Fahad. AlSaeed, do you have something to say about this question?
Yes. Actually, it's actually something that I always try to fight, which is usually strange that as a lighting designer, sometimes I try to convince clients to use less artificial light, and this made me think of such fact more and more. especially when I visited these beautiful historic mosques, and I just realized that they were perfectly lit at night with oil lamps. And when I did the project, which is the Grand Mosque, there was a big debate that the lighting levels, they have to be inside very high, and a lot of lighting levels, they have to be achieved. In reality, sometimes less is more, and this will make us adapt more to nature, to save energy, to be more sustainable. And I think Arabian or Islamic architecture in general gave amazing example of how really we can have natural light and as well as artificial light in low quantities that would really let us enjoy the sceneries in nature landscapes and in different areas as well. This is something I would like to add up that I have in mind. Thank you.
Thank you. I look forward to seeing all of these thoughts manifested, Saraha. And I'm going to throw like a last question before we end this conversation. This is an expert panel, in my opinion. So I would like to ask about what you've been thinking recently about your expertise, even if it has nothing to do with, what we spoke about today, but what's on your mind? What are you looking into? What are you learning or would like to learn more of so that we can all keep up with your brilliance? So could we maybe start with Dr. Doherty?
Well, I suppose a couple of things. One is about the nighttime and how we can maybe more sensitively adapt to the nighttime. How can we see the stars from cities again? Can we ever? And, if the moon is shining for a number of nights of the month, can we actually make use of that moonlight? But what I've been focusing more on is the issue of color in cities and landscapes, because color and light, as we've heard, are intertwined. And the colors that surround us are, I think, really important, not just for our well-being and not just for how we feel, but they also have environmental performance, and I think this is something that we don't, that goes hand in hand with the design of light.
Thank you. We're going to start thinking about colors then. How about AlSaeed? تفضل. What have you been thinking of lately? Yeah.
Well, actually, since I have been recently, I have joined as an advisor at the Royal Commission of Riyadh City as a subject matter expert for lighting. I really realized that it's really very important to focus more and more on urban design and urban development, not only for Riyadh City, for any city in Saudi Arabia, not only for big cities, even for small cities, because the way that really a country can be successful and sustainable is to really understand how urban design has to be developed. So I would really like, and I would say that I should really learn more about urban design, urban development, and how it can be integrated with sustainable lighting design. It's really an important topic, because nowadays we can see most of the projects that are being built in the Saudi region, more than 50 or even more than 70% of them are outdoor. We don't see a lot of building being erected as a single project. We are seeing developments like NEOM, like Qiddiya, like the Red Sea development, like Roshan development. So all these are actually urban development. And if we don't have enough urban designers who understand lighting, architecture, sustainability, all these aspects being balanced together, it would be really a big issue for continuity.
Well, Allah yawaffaq with that journey, AlSaeed. I really hope that it's, we need that kind of thinking here, and so proud and happy that you're part of that commission. Congratulations on that as well.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And we'll hear also from Dr. Fahad. Could you please تختمها بمسك and tell us what you've been thinking?
That's very. I will extremely happy for what happened in the last few weeks. Riyadh became a big exhibit of light. Now, I will warn about one thing. The young generation audience taste and creativity has been risen by this exhibit. So expect a very knowledgeable generation that will be demanding more and more. So I will say thank to Riyadh for this Noor, and I'm sure great thing about Bint Noor, daughter of light. I think he has Riyadh in his mind. This is number one. Number two, I mean, such an activity as an open exhibit generation was made by a man who came from the future and the future in his heart to lead us to the future. Thank you, Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, for making Riyadh, Bint Noor, the city, and for enlightening our young generation for the /create/light in general. This is an event that, thank God, I've saw it, even though it's a little bit late, but it's not better than nothing. Thank you very much to everyone.
Well, thank you, Dr. Fahad. Thank you, Gareth, and thank you, Abdulaziz, for your time. Really, that was so enjoyable.
Thank you again for having us, and we wish you all the success in the future as well for everyone.
الله يخليك. شكرا ويسمع منك. شكرا Dr. Doherty so much, and we hope to see you back here in the region as well soon, inshallah.
And thanks to you, Tara, before we finish, for this nice handling of the
amazing moderator, actually.
Thank you. It's my pleasure, honestly. And thank you. And I'm going to say now a shout out. Since we're thanking everyone, I'm going to thank my family because, you know, they're supporting me in doing this. So really, thank you to everyone, and also to the listeners at home, including my mom and my dad and my grandmother, Layla. And I hope that I see you all soon. And I recommend that everybody check out the last events that are happening in Noor Riyadh before you miss out. These conversations are gonna be recorded, so when you see them later, I hope you've enjoyed them. And that's all for now, everybody. Good night and stay together.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye bye.
Thank you very much.